Ah, there we go. We were waiting for you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can't. Yeah. Looking forward to tomorrow. All right. Good afternoon. Quite a few updates for you on the humanitarian end, but I'll just start with that. Today, the Secretary General addressed via video conference the Artificial Intelligence Summit that is ongoing in Seoul, in the Republic of Korea. He said that artificial intelligence systems are still being deployed with little oversight and little accountability, and he warned that we cannot sleepwalk into a dystopian future. The Secretary General warned that we can. He also warned of the dystopian future where the powers of AI is controlled by a few people, or worse, by opaque algorithms beyond human understanding. The Secretary General called for universal guardrails and said the summit of the future that he will convene in September is an opportunity to build the foundations of artificial intelligence governance. The full remarks were shared with you. Update on Gaza and the work of UNRWA. Our colleagues at UNRWA report that today the agency's distribution center, as well as the World Food Programme's warehouses, both in Rafah, are now inaccessible due to ongoing military operation. UNRWA says that its health centers have not received any medical supplies for the past 10 days. Despite this, healthcare staff continue to provide thousands of medical consultations each day at health centers that are still operational. Meanwhile, the head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, expressed deep concern over the safety of patients and hospital staff remaining at Al-Auda Hospital in northern Gaza. In a social media post, he said the facility has been under siege since Sunday, with no one allowed to leave or enter. And yesterday afternoon, you will have heard from Tor Venislan, the special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, who said that the situation in Rafah is becoming increasingly desperate, dangerous for an already besieged population. He urged the parties to redouble all efforts and return to the negotiating table immediately and in good faith. Mr. Venislan expressed concern that the failure to reach a ceasefire in Gaza and a large-scale military operation in Rafah increases the risk of escalating regional tensions. For her part, Edem Wasornu, the Director of Operation and Advocacy for the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, told council members that living conditions continue to deteriorate because of heavy fighting, particularly in the Jabalia and in the eastern Rafah areas of Gaza, as well as Israeli bombardments from land, air, and sea. Among other things, she said that as of May 18th, just 10 bakeries are operational out of 16 that are supported by our humanitarian partners. However, it is expected that these will run out of stock and fuel within days if no additional supplies are received. An estimated 14,000 critical patients currently require medical evacuation out of the Gaza Strip. Today, the Security Council is holding its annual briefing on the protection of civilians in armed conflict. Briefing council members on our behalf is the Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, Alison Diritu. In her remarks, she raised the alarm about the ongoing situation in Sudan, adding that the situation there today bears all the marks of a risk of genocide. She says it's imperative to expedite all possible actions to protect innocent civilian populations. Joyce Masuya, the Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator, also briefed council members. She reminded council members that the situation of civilians in armed conflict in 2023 was dire. Also to note, the 7th edition of the Protection of Civilians Week is taking place this week with 17 side events to amplify the voices of civilians impacted by armed conflict. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the Security Council resolutions, of the Security Council considering the protection of civilians as an item of its agenda, and the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. The Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, visited Afghanistan from the 18th to the 21st of May. That is yesterday, correct? That is today. She met with the de facto authorities, the diplomatic community in Kabul, and representatives of civil society. The meeting of special envoys on Afghanistan that the United Nations is organizing in Doha on 30 June and July 1st was the center of her discussions. She extended to the de facto Minister of Foreign Affairs, Amir Khan Muttaqi, an advance invitation from the Secretary General to participate at the forthcoming meeting of special envoys. The meeting aims to increase international engagement with Afghanistan in a more coherent, coordinated, and structured manner. Ms. DiCarlo discussed with her interlocutors the various challenges that Afghanistan is facing. Among other topics, she discussed the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, particularly the restrictions on education of women. And on the humanitarian front, as you will recall, the floods that struck the northeastern and northwestern areas of the country over the past 2 weeks. Our colleagues at the World Food Program said that these floods have impacted more than 80,000 people and are likely to intensify in the coming months, with a significant impact on food security. WFP is warning that the affected districts, most of which are hunger hotspots, are already in crisis levels of food insecurity. The Food Agency is saying that it is investing in climate adaptation projects designed and built by communities to shield them from the impacts of the climate crisis. These include protective walls, dams, and irrigations. And coming back to this hemisphere on Haiti, our humanitarian colleagues continue to sound the alarm about the impact of the crisis on education. Since the beginning of May, armed groups have taken control of several neighborhoods in the capital of Port-au-Prince, as we've been telling you. That has led to the looting and the burning down of schools. According to our education partners, 30 attacks on schools have been recorded since the start of this year. Between July of last year and mid-May of this year, violence has forced the closure of nearly 900 schools in Port-au-Prince and in the Artibonite province. This has impacted nearly 200,000 young people who are yearning for an education and 400 of their teachers. Elsewhere in the country, we and our partners continue to support children. For example, as we mentioned previously, the World Food Program and its partners continue to operate the school meals program. They have reached nearly 400,000 school children since the beginning of the year. And flying over to Europe and in Ukraine, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that we and our partners are continuing to support civilians impacted by attacks and active fighting in the Kharkiv region. In Kharkiv city itself, which hosts a transit center for evacuees, humanitarian workers assisted some nearly 9,000 people who have been recently displaced. Our partners have also helped more than 800 evacuated people, including 170 people with limited mobility, hosted in premises and provided by the authorities. At the same time, as attacks in frontline areas continue, power cuts impacted 190,000 people in Kharkiv city this morning. That's what the energy ministry in Ukraine is telling us. And in the Sumy region, the northeast, people are also fleeing attacks in the communities on the Ukraine-Russia border. Heading to Africa, in Burkina Faso, our emergency relief coordinator, Martin Griffiths, has allocated $5 million from the Central Emergency Relief Fund to support the emergency response in Burkina Faso. The funds will support 150,000 people in the Sahel, Center, North, and East regions with life-saving assistance. The funds will also facilitate humanitarian operations. Nearly 3 million people across Burkina Faso are expected to face acute food insecurity. That is known officially as IPC Phase 3 during the lean season from June to September and will require humanitarian assistance. This year, $935 million American dollars is needed for a humanitarian response plan. It is less than 13% funded, with only $118 million in the bank. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our humanitarian colleagues are reporting that clashes over land in the province of Chopo in the country's northeast have resulted in the deaths of dozens of civilians since the end of April. According to humanitarian organizations, more than 740 civilians have been killed and over 75,000 people displaced in Kisangani due to clashes over land since February last year. Humanitarian organizations are mobilized to provide health care to the injured and displaced, Aid workers are also aiming to provide shelter, access to clean water, hygiene, and sanitation. An assessment mission led by our humanitarian coordinating colleagues found that food, healthcare, and shelter are the top needs for people who have been displaced. They tell us that addressing the root causes of land conflicts is crucial to prevent an escalation of intercommunal violence in Kisangani, which is home to 1.4 million people. OCHA reiterates its call on all involved to work together to end the violence, protect civilians, and find sustainable solution to the conflict in the area around Kisangani. And in South Sudan, our peacekeepers there report that they facilitated a joint visit with state authorities to Boro Medina in Raja County near Sudan's border to assess the security and humanitarian situation in an area where hundreds of refugees and returnees continue to arrive every day. The peacekeeping mission has increased its presence, including patrols in the area. Just to give you a little bit of context with regards to Boro Medina, this town is the first major stop for thousands of refugees and returnees crossing from western Bahr el-Ghazal state since the start of the conflict in Sudan. Currently, more than 5,000 asylum seekers and a little above 7,000 returnees have added to the strain of an already scarce livelihood resources, which has led to increased tensions with the host community in South Sudan. 2 international days to flag to you. The first is a real UN day. It is the World Day for Cultural Diversity for Dialogue and Development. The day celebrates the richness of the world's cultures. And I wish I'd brought some scones and Devonshire cream for you, but today is the International Tea Day. Yep. Fun fact, tea is the world's most consumed drink after water. This drink has been with us for a long time and is the main source of income for some of the world's poorest countries. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. Can you give us an update on aid coming in via the land crossings and also on the distribution of aid that came in from Cyprus via the U.S. Pier?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you on terms of the number of the crossings, on Rafah, it remains closed. And I think our colleagues at OCHA in their briefing to the Security Council yesterday said the closure had prevented the entry of some 82,000 metric tons of supplies, including food and medicines. Karim Shalom, which, as you know, had been a main entry point for critical aid, remains open in principle, in the sense that materials arriving from the Israeli side, but as always, the challenge for us is accessing that area. The challenges to access remain because of the ongoing fighting, challenging logistics, and just the safety of our colleagues and the complexity of coordinating with all those involved. In terms of the north, Erez was open from the 1st to the 9th, but has remained closed since then. And the newly opened Erez West crossing is now being used for limited quantities of aid. But now areas in the vicinity of the crossings are also under evacuation order. There's been no new arrival of trucks on the floating pier since Saturday.
And was the aid from those trucks actually delivered to the warehouse or to anybody on land?
On Friday, there were about 10 trucks that made it. On Saturday, there were 16 trucks that left the floating pier, but 11 of those trucks never made it to the warehouse. Crowds had stopped the trucks at various points along the way. There was, what I think I would refer to as self-distribution. These trucks were traveling through areas where there'd been no aid. I think people feared that they would never see aid. They grabbed what they could. So only five of the 16 trucks made it to the warehouse.
And has there been any distribution of any of that aid?
The aid is then basically WFP drops off the aid at its warehouse, and its local partners then distribute the aid as they can. But I don't have that sort of granularity. I think the fact that the trucks didn't make it underscores the need for consistent delivery of aid. And obviously for a ceasefire, so we have access to aid that is needed. So people know that when they see a truck, there will be more trucks, that there is more aid in the pipeline, and it's not just a one-off.
And just one final question. Who was responsible for security for those trucks? We don't have any armed security. We operate separately, obviously, from the Israeli Defense Forces. So part of it is the work that we do with various community groups and humanitarian partners so that people understand where these trucks are coming from and where they're going and what they're being used for. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. Today, the Israeli authorities confiscated the television equipment from the Associated Press, a camera that was being used, that was in Israel to show a live feed of this Gaza skyline. Does the Secretary General have any reaction to that?
I saw the reports in the Israeli press this morning. Frankly, it's quite shocking. I think journalists need to be able to do their work freely. The Associated Press of all news organizations should be allowed to do its work freely and free of any harassment.
And on UNRWA, regarding the suspension of food distribution, you said, if I heard you correctly, that the reason is because of ongoing military operations, correct?
Yeah.
Are you referring to Israeli military operations?
I spoke to one of my UNRWA colleagues just before coming in here. They're not sticking around to see who's doing the firing. It's an active combat zone. There are bullets are flying, so to not to sound glib, so they have no access to those areas. But it's clear that they are, that the parties who are in conflict are fighting.
And just one last follow-up is what are the ramifications to the fact that UNRWA has suspended food distribution?
People don't eat. Benny.
Since you update us in a very granular way every day about the situation.
As much as I can.
Oh, is that better?
Yes, yeah. No.
So every day you update us in a very granular way about food distribution. You have OCHA, you have UNRWA, you have WFP, so on and so forth. And just what you described now about the situation in Kerem Shalom, in Erez, and on the Pier, is it the UN determination that Israel is using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare?
I think I will not make a legal pronouncement here. We have been very, very vocal about the fact that not enough humanitarian aid has been let through. We've told this to our Israeli counterparts. We have called for the reopening of all the crossings.
I'm not asking you to make legal
No, I know, but I understand also the legal debate that is ongoing right now in terms of what is going on with the International Criminal Court. But I'm just saying Benny, I think we've been very, very clear in the fact that we don't think the Israeli authorities are allowing enough humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip.
So it is their method of warfare?
You've asked me a question, I've answered it.
No, you haven't.
Well, I've answered it to the best of my ability, Counselor.
I just don't want you to put words into my mouth. Thank you. Yes, Jordan.
Thank you.
And then go to Benno, sorry.
As you know, Gaza is a combination of refugees, 1.4 million people registered with United Nations agency, which is UNRWA. And the other 800,000, they are the original Gazan citizen. Out of the 35,000 people who were killed, do you know how many of them are refugees?
No, sir. That is a question you need to ask to the people who own those figures, and that is the Ministry of Health.
Second question, do you have any update on the investigation about the attack against the DSS vehicle? You want any about the investigation?
About the OIOS investigation?
No.
Which
about
one?
The DSS.
No, I do not.
You
I
know.
do not.
Okay. Too small, and I go, if you allow me. The SG went to Middle East, and he went to Bahrain, to Oman, to Kuwait, and you issued some statements. Is there anything hidden about his meetings? Is he satisfied? Is there any
anything
benefit from his visit that you did not tell us?
I was in most of those meetings. I didn't see anything that I couldn't see.
Is he happy? Like,
Is the Secretary General happy? He's
yeah.
not very happy these days. I'll come back to you. Benno.
Thank you. I actually think that I need some more explanation about the pier and the trucks that were, I would say, looted, or you said...
I think, listen...
But you don't know what I want to ask.
Sorry, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm a little...
It's
too much coffee this morning. Go ahead, Benno.
The trucks coming from the pier, they had some security, I guess. Farhan said we are working out some security details or whatever a few days ago. There was security that they had, or were they absolutely without anybody?
There is no, as far as I mean, we were I think what we were been referring to was about the safety and security of our colleagues who are picking up the aid and just kind of the handoff point in a sense, right? But there is no, we do not have UN armed security with these trucks. And we have seen over and over again since the beginning of this conflict issues with the safety of humanitarian workers. We've had drivers that have been attacked, and it's so.
Sorry, but the truck drivers are Palestinians, maybe from UNRWA even?
They're Palestinian. I mean, this is a WFP operation.
Okay. Who provides the security for them? You said no UN troops. Yes, of course not. But
I mean, there is no armed security. They are the best security, the best safety comes from the community, right? When people understand and know that there will be a constant flow of aid, that there will be distribution that is well organized, that is timed. That is not possible in an active combat zone. I cannot put myself in the shoes of people who may have been displaced once, twice, 3 times over, who do not know where their next meal comes from, who see a truck laden with food, stop for whatever reason, or not stop, and decide to take things, right? So that is my understanding of what happened.
Yeah, no, and no question about that. I asked myself just I think you said the IDF can't protect the convoys because that would kind of violate the neutrality.
Right, we do not operate with armed escort because we need to be. There's certain humanitarian principles of especially operational neutrality that need to be respected.
And then very last one, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I had I thought I remembered that the IDF was actually providing some security for some deliveries that came in from land borders. Is that, am I wrong about this?
There may be other, I'm talking about UN operations.
Yeah.
There's private sector, there are other things going on. I can only speak about what we do. Deji.
Yeah, first 2 follow-ups on the floating dock and the humanitarian aid in Gaza. Given the fact that you just said the constant aid delivery would be a solution to all those problems. But given the security and the safety issue, do you have plans for the future floating pier operations? WFP has it, the plans.
Sorry, do we say again?
Do you have any more plans for future deliveries
Yeah, I mean,
from the floating pier?
we are trying. WFP is in the business of delivering food. And I can tell you from the conversations that I've had, that's what they're focused on, right? They're speaking to all the parties to see how quickly we can get more trucks being delivered. But obviously, there are a lot of other things that need to be worked out on a daily basis.
Okay, my second follow-up, have the UN agencies in Gaza recently get any fuels? Because every day, I think last week, we heard about the fuel issue.
Yes, on the fuel, and this is what I just received. OCHA, I think this was yesterday, right? I think to what Adam said, 650,000 liters of fuel have entered Gaza since the start of the Rafah operation, but that's a quarter of the allocations we had prior to May 6th. So there was a limited amount of fuel that came in on an exceptional basis only. So we're not getting enough for the fuel that we need.
From where? From which border crossings?
I think it came in through Karim Shalom.
Okay, my question now is, today the Special Advisor to Secretary General on Prevention of Genocide in the Security Council meeting talked lengthy on Sudan, but she did not even mention the word Gaza. May I know why?
You should. I mean, the remarks speak for themselves. You're welcome to contact her office.
She said in her statement that early warning, and her job is to make early warnings and make recommendations to Security Council by bringing to their attention potential situation that could result in genocide, and on actions to prevent or halt genocide. So that.
As I said, I think her remarks were clear. If you have any questions about what was in and what was not in, I would suggest you contact her office. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. Two senior UN officials gave briefings to the Security Council, and both did not mention Palestine. Virginia Gamba, when she spoke about children in armed conflict, and today Ms. Indrito, when she spoke about protection of civilians in armed conflict, she did not mention one word about the genocidal war taking place in Gaza now. Can you explain that, please?
As I said, UN officials, I mean, you're welcome to contact their offices. Ms. Gamba will present her report, her annual report, Children in Armed Conflict, later in June, and judge her for what she says or what she doesn't say.
My second question, Mr. Thor Winsland said this. Just last week, a staff member of safety and security from India died and another staff injured. Is using the word died correct now?
The person is no longer alive. Killed. I mean, Abdelhamid, with all due respect, things are said. You're welcome to. You're welcome to say they were well said. You're welcome to say they were not well said. That is your freedom as a journalist. But you and I have gone through this over and over again. The words used were those used. If you have another question,
yes, one more. We haven't heard from Sigrid Kaag for some time now. Where is she and what is she doing?
Sigrid Kaag's based in Amman. I think every time she comes to New York, she speaks to you, but she's continuing her work. Frank.
I have a protocol question. The lowering
if you could put your microphone a little louder, closer.
Yeah, I have a protocol question. The lowering of the flag, the UN flag for President Raisi, who orders that?
It's not an order. It was done at the request of the permanent mission of Iran. It traditionally, when a sitting when a head of state dies in office, the flags are lowered if the mission so requests it.
As a follow-up, Why don't they do that for a UN security officer that was killed on the 13th?
This is a place of precedent. The national flags are lowered for certain reasons. They will be, I think, within the next, I think around May 30th, there will be the annual ceremony which the Secretary General honors all of those UN staffers who have been killed in the line of duty. And sadly, if you look at the number of UN colleagues who have died in the last year, and the flags were lowered, the flags would not fly many days of the year. Stefano, and then we'll go to that side.
Thank you, Stéphane. This is a question I wanted to ask before the press conference, but was not possible. So I'm going to ask to you.
I feel bad because I did ask you to be there. Yeah.
And I'm going to, after all, the Secretary General is the boss, so that's of
Yeah, but
this
he's not here.
organization,
Yeah.
it should be. According to the Washington Post, the European Union and individual European countries are supporting and funding aggressive operation by North African governments to detain tens of thousands of migrants every year, dump them in the remote areas, often in the desert. We're talking about people starving here. Well, apparently, European funds were used to train personnel, purchase equipment for units involved in human rights
No, we read the story.
violations.
Yeah.
So, yes, they say that there was, according to the Washington Post, rejected in most inhospitable area of North Africa.
I read the story at length. What is the question?
What does the secretary think? What does he
I
intend
think
to do? I think
his reaction to reading the story was one of horror. It's a horrific story, and it is incumbent on all member states, whether it's those that are doing these operations, those who are funding these types of operations, wherever they may be, that the human rights of each individual, migrant or refugee, whether they're a migrant or they're a refugee, they're a human being, be respected, and any violation be fully investigated and people be held accountable. It's a horrific, the story, I mean, I encourage all of you to read, it appeared in many different places. It's a horrific story.
Thank you for your answer, Stéphane. But if I didn't ask the question, because you didn't talk about it at the beginning, and before we couldn't ask a question to people that should protect migrants, I mean, why the migrants are always left the last
Well, first
in
of
this
all, I think,
organization?
listen, from our part, and if you, the story also says the investigation done by these journalists confirms what has been said in UN reports, right? So it's not as if we don't talk about it. I often talk about it from here. Again, whether it's on migration or any other issue, we talk about it. Whether or not journalists write about it is beyond my own authority. Bisan and then Ibtisam.
I have two questions. Do you have any comment on the raid in Jenin this morning? I mean, a surgeon, a teacher, a student was killed.
Not at this point. I hadn't seen any report on it at this point, but I think we have expressed our very deep concern at the ongoing violence that Palestinian civilians are subjected to in the occupied West Bank, and I think Mr. Venesland referred to it.
So a group of bipartisan senators just put out a statement condemning the ICC. President Biden called it outrageous. Secretary Blinken just now in a hearing said that the administration would be willing to speak with Congress or, discuss with Congress ways to respond. Isn't it concerning, I mean, for international order that these statements are coming out of the U.S.?
Look, we're not going to comment on every statement that comes out of every member state. But what is clear is that every member state has a responsibility to respect the international institutions. Ibtisam Azam.
Thank you. Just a follow-up on two things. First, on Stefano's question. To which extent is this subject, does this subject even come up in discussions of the Secretary General with European leaders, and given the fact that we are seeing more and more human rights violations and the insistence of these countries to send migrants back or to countries where they know very well that there will be human trafficking and killing, etc.?
It comes up often, and it also, I know, is the subject of a lot of discussions with the High Commissioner for Refugees, and I have no doubt the Director General of the IOM. We do a lot of work and reporting on it, also on our human rights colleagues. I think notably, I think the mission in Libya, because we do have a big presence in Libya, our human rights have been very, very clear on what is going on in Libya. So this is also the topic of discussions in the Secretary General's Executive Office. As you know very well, the issue of refugees and migrants and people on the move is one that is very close and dear to his heart, given his 10 years he served as High Commissioner. So this is an issue that is never forgotten by him.
Sorry, I
yes,
have
go ahead.
another two very quick. Follow up on the American Pier, something that you said that there was no delivery since Sunday, like for the third day. And the delivery that happened before was
there was Friday and Saturday.
Yeah. And the delivery, what you mentioned is in average is about 10 trucks, more or
Well, I
less.
mean, it's hard to do an average on 2 days.
Okay, yeah. But the
I think
Americans
most
were,
statistician would tell you that's not enough of a data point to do an average.
You're the expert.
Yeah.
So I guess my question here, when the opening of that port was announced, the Americans, if I'm not mistaken, were talking about that they are aiming to 100 trucks, to 100 to 150 trucks, the max capacity that they have. And we are seeing that not even 10% of that if we look at these 2 days. So that my question here is, who is actually deciding about this? Like, how much comes to this port, and where does it go from there?
Well, I mean, there is a mechanism, and I think Sigrid Kaag has spoken to it. There's a framework that has been created, but there are also facts on the ground. And I think you would need to speak to WFP to get a little bit more detail about what the biggest stumbling block is. But I think all of this reaffirms what we've been saying for a while, is that we welcome additional routes into Gaza, right? We welcome this arrival of the U.S.-built pier and the efforts of Cyprus. But it is not and cannot be a substitute to open a massive delivery via land.
Okay, sorry, I have one last question on Tunisia. There is more and more recently, and before that, but recently it's more arrests against journalists, crackdown on human rights defenders. Do you have any statement on that?
We've been watching this situation for quite some time, and I know we and our human rights colleagues have expressed some very deep concern about some of the arrests that we've been seeing. Let's go to the screen. Iftikhar, and then Dawn.
Thank you, Steph. Regarding your readout on the visit of Ms. DiCarlo to Afghanistan, you have given us the issues she raised with the Taliban, but not their reaction, especially the invitation she extended to the Doha meeting. What was their response?
I think, Iftikhar, you would have to ask the person, the spokesman for the Taliban as to what their response will be.
He is in Kabul.
Sorry?
He is in Kabul.
I'm sure somebody's got a phone number somewhere, Iftikhar. And I'm sure Associated Press of Pakistan has some stringer in Kabul. Dawn.
Thanks, Steph. It's actually a follow-up on Iktisam's question, and I apologize if I missed it, but just simply why haven't there been more trucks since Sunday coming off the pier? Do you have any detail on where things aren't working or?
Well, beyond the fact that there remains an active conflict, no, I do not have any more details at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Edith and Benny. Benno, sorry, then Benny. Let's get confused.
Thank you, Steph. Yesterday, we heard that the number of displacements since the beginning of the past 2 weeks had been over 900,000. Are there any new figures?
I did not get any new ones
And,
today.
On the issue of the AP camera, does the Secretary General urge the Israeli government to return the AP equipment that it confiscated and to restore the AP position in southern Israel near the Gaza border?
Yes, on all those questions. Benno.
One more follow-up to the pier, and then I have a other question. Given that the pier basically is just a workaround for existing routes, do you consider it a giant waste of money as well?
Look, no, there were trucks that got in. There was aid that got in, right? That was good. All we're saying is that it's not enough. Your other question.
As you know, I guess, in 2 days, the General Assembly will decide if there will be a day of commemoration for the genocide in Srebrenica. I know that your boss is not voting on GA resolutions, but he has an opinion and a voice. Yeah. Would he be in favor of such a day?
Look, we will let the member states decide in their wisdom what to do. As we've said before, a UN court did rule that there was genocide in Bosnia. Benny.
Yes, sir. And please don't call me counselor, because I have another question that may be a little bit... So you said before that every country has to respect international organizations, and you made that comment in reference to the U.S. and the ICC.
I made it in reference to a lot of comments that have been made. Yeah.
Judge, let me ask you the question. International organizations' authority comes from treaties. Is that correct? Yes.
Some do, yeah.
Yeah. The ICC is based on the Rome Treaty.
Right.
Now, countries that have not ratified the Rome Treaty and therefore are not members of the ICC, do they have an obligation, in your view, to respect that specific international organization?
My comment as it was framed and phrased stands. Jordan.
Thank you. Finally, this is 2 tiny questions. Okay. One, if you know, who is the highest UN official in Iran?
The resident coordinator.
And on second question on Ms. Sigrid Kaag, is she in any way in charge, or does she have any staff in Gaza currently working with...
I mean, she has a role to play in Gaza because her role is senior.
Staff.
I don't know where every one of her staff members is at this point.
What is the relationship between your office and her communication officer? Because that's
what exactly does that mean?
Does it mean like like OCHA send you like daily WFP? Does like Ms. Sigrid Kaag office send you updates on what's happening in Gaza? She's in charge.
I'm not sure where you're going with that question. I have the beauty of this job is I get to call whoever I want and ask them whatever I want. Sometimes they tell me what's going on. Sometimes they don't. And when they tell me what's going on, I share it with you most of the time.
You understand? When the last time you spoke to the office of Ms. Kaag?
You know, in as much as I would like to be as transparent with you, my call logs and my WhatsApp logs, my Signal logs, my SMS logs, my Facebook Messenger logs, my Twitter messages logs will not be shared. On that note, bon appétit.
Stéphane.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mike, briefly, unless you answered this in the last 7 minutes, can you state what is happening in Haiti? Is the Kenyan commander meeting with the deputy special rep there today?
The short answer on that question, I do not know, and I think your colleagues need to try to reach out to our mission there.
All right, thank you. Have a nice lunch.
Thank you.